The early morning mist hung heavy over the border, shrouding the landscape in an eerie silence. It was a silence that belied the tension and anticipation that had been building for weeks. August 6, 2024. A date that would soon be etched into the annals of history. A date etched in the memories of soldiers on both sides. For them, it was more than just another day. It was a day of reckoning, a day that would test their resolve and courage. Ukrainian forces, a spearhead of tanks and armored vehicles, pierced the Russian frontier. Their target, Kursk Oblast. This was not a mere skirmish, it was a full-scale offensive aimed at the heart of Russian defenses. It was a gamble, a bold thrust into enemy territory. Military strategists had spent countless hours planning this operation, weighing the risks and potential rewards. A calculated risk to seize the initiative, to disrupt Russian supply lines, and to send a powerful message to Moscow. The message was clear. Ukraine would not be cowed. The initial days were a whirlwind of movement. Ukrainian troops advanced rapidly, their momentum seemingly unstoppable. Ukrainian troops, battle-hardened and fueled by a year of defiance, made significant gains. Villages fell, Russian defenses buckled. The speed and ferocity of the Ukrainian advance caught the Russians off guard. The element of surprise played a crucial role. The Russians were unprepared for such a bold move, and their initial response was chaotic. For a brief moment there was a sense of euphoria. Ukrainian soldiers celebrated their victories, their spirits lifted by the success of their daring operation. Could this be the turning point? Could this audacious offensive change the course of the war? Could Ukraine, against all odds, take the fight to the aggressor on their own soil? The possibility seemed within reach, and the world watched with bated breath. The world watched, captivated by the audacity of the Ukrainian offensive. News outlets around the globe broadcasted the unfolding drama, and people everywhere were glued to their screens. This was no longer a defensive war confined to Ukrainian territory. The dynamics of the conflict had shifted dramatically. This was a bold strike into the heart of Russia itself. The implications were profound, and the stakes had never been higher. The stakes had been raised. This was a high-stakes gamble, a move that could either turn the tide of the war or lead to devastating consequences. The geopolitical landscape trembled with uncertainty. World leaders held their breath, aware that the outcome of this offensive could reshape the global order. The ghosts of conflicts past, of invasions and counter-invasions, stirred from their slumber. History seemed to be repeating itself, but with new players and new stakes. The Ukrainian operation, however, was not simply a show of force. It was a meticulously planned military maneuver with clear strategic objectives. It was a carefully planned military maneuver with strategic objectives. Every move was calculated, every decision weighed for its potential impact. By striking at Kursk, Ukraine aimed to disrupt Russian logistics, tie down enemy troops, and relieve pressure on other fronts, particularly in the embattled Donbas region. The success of this operation could have far-reaching consequences. The incursion was a gamble, yes, but a calculated one with the potential for significant strategic gains. The outcome was uncertain, but the potential rewards were immense. The Kremlin's response was swift and brutal. The growl of Russian artillery echoed across the plains. Fighter jets screamed through the skies, unleashing their deadly payloads. A state of emergency was declared in Kursk. The bear, wounded but far from defeated, had been roused from its slumber. By mid-September, the tide began to turn. Russian forces, bolstered by reinforcements and fueled by a deep-seated anger, launched their counteroffensive. The Ukrainian advance stalled. Gains were fiercely contested. The flat, open terrain of Kursk, once advantageous for the attackers, now exposed them to the full fury of Russian firepower. The counteroffensive revealed a chilling truth. While the initial Ukrainian assault had exposed vulnerabilities in Russian defenses, it had also revealed the limitations of Ukraine's own capabilities. Logistical challenges mounted. Maintaining supply lines deep inside enemy territory proved difficult. The lack of air superiority hampered Ukrainian movements and exposed them to constant threat from above. The conflict settled into a bloody stalemate. Villages changed hands multiple times. Trenches, reminiscent of a bygone era of warfare, scarred the landscape. The initial Ukrainian gains, hard-won and paid for in blood, were slowly eroded. The Kursk gamble, it seemed, had reached a perilous impasse. Throughout the tumultuous events of 2024, one constant remained: the unwavering support of Ukraine's Western allies. From Washington to London, from Paris to Berlin, The message was clear: Ukraine would not stand alone. The flow of military aid, a lifeline for the embattled nation, continued unabated. Javelin anti-tank missiles, already legendary for their effectiveness against Russian armor, continued to flow into the hands of Ukrainian soldiers. HIMARS rocket systems, capable of striking deep behind enemy lines, provided much-needed firepower. Stinger missiles, deadly against low-flying aircraft, offered a semblance of air defense against the ever-present threat from above. But the aid went beyond weaponry. Medical supplies, crucial for treating the wounded, arrived in a steady stream. Humanitarian assistance provided a lifeline to civilians caught in the crossfire. Financial aid helped to prop up the Ukrainian economy, ravaged by the conflict. The West's commitment to Ukraine, however, was not solely driven by altruism. The conflict had become a proxy war, a high-stakes geopolitical chess match between Russia and the West. Ukraine, thrust onto the front lines of this struggle, had become a bulwark against Russian expansionism. Supporting Ukraine was not just a moral imperative, it was a strategic necessity. Despite the unwavering support of its allies, Ukraine faced formidable challenges in sustaining its offensive in Kursk. The initial momentum, which had been so promising, began to wane as the days turned into weeks. The initial momentum had been lost, and the element of surprise, so crucial in the early days, was gone. Ukrainian forces found themselves in a grueling battle of wits and endurance. Russia, stung by the audacity of the Ukrainian incursion, had adapted its tactics and poured resources into the region. The Russian military machine, once caught off guard, now moved with calculated precision. Logistical challenges continued to plague the Ukrainian war effort. Supply lines were stretched thin, and the rugged terrain made transportation a Herculean task. Maintaining supply lines over difficult terrain under constant threat from Russian air power proved to be a nightmare. Every convoy was a gamble, every route a potential death trap. The lack of air superiority remained a critical vulnerability, limiting Ukrainian movements and exposing them to constant danger from above. Russian jets dominated the skies, making every advance perilous. The human cost of the conflict was staggering. Injuries and fatalities mounted, and the sight of comrades falling in battle weighed heavily on the soldiers' spirits. Casualty figures, shrouded in the fog of war, painted a grim picture. The true scale of the losses was hard to comprehend, but the impact was felt deeply by all. Both sides suffered heavy losses. The relentless shelling, the close-quarters combat, and the ever-present threat of death from above took a heavy toll on the morale of even the most battle-hardened soldiers. The ever-present threat of death from above took a heavy toll on the morale of even the most battle-hardened soldiers. The psychological strain was immense. The Kursk offensive had exposed a fundamental truth of the conflict, that the war was not just about territory, but about endurance and resilience. Russia, despite its setbacks and strategic blunders, possessed a deep well of manpower and resources. Their ability to replenish and reinforce seemed almost inexhaustible. Ukraine, even with the unwavering support of its allies, faced an uphill struggle against a larger and more heavily armed adversary. The support was crucial, but the challenges remained daunting. The conflict, it seemed, was destined to become a grueling war of attrition. Both sides were locked in a deadly embrace with no clear end in sight. "We knew it wouldn't be easy," said Captain Mikola, a veteran of the fighting in Kursk, his voice weary but resolute. He had seen countless battles, each one more intense than the last. They threw everything they had at us: tanks, artillery, airstrikes. The sky was filled with the roar of engines and the ground shook with every explosion. But we held our ground. Every inch of it was soaked in sweat and blood, but we did not falter. Captain Mikola's words echoed the sentiments of many Ukrainian soldiers who had witnessed the horrors of the Kursk campaign firsthand. They had seen friends fall and had to keep moving forward. They spoke of the ferocity of the Russian counterattack, the sheer force that came at them, wave after wave, the constant fear of airstrikes, the whistling sound that preceded destruction, and the exhaustion that came from weeks of relentless fighting. Sleep was a luxury they could rarely afford. "We are fighting for our homes, for our families, for our very existence," said a young Ukrainian soldier, his voice filled with emotion. "Every battle is personal, every loss is felt deeply. We have nowhere to retreat to. This is our land, our heritage. We will fight to the end. There is no other option for us. We will fight to the end. We are determined to protect what is ours." The soldiers spoke of the importance of Western aid, the lifeline it provided in their darkest hours, of how the javelins and HIMARS had made a tangible difference on the battlefield. These tools were game changers, but they also spoke of the need for more, for heavier weapons, for fighter jets, for anything that would help them level the playing field against their Russian adversaries. The fight was far from over. For anything that would help them level the playing field against their Russian adversaries. Every piece of equipment could mean the difference between life and death. Their voices, raw and unfiltered, offered a glimpse into the reality of the conflict, a stark reminder of the human cost of war. A stark reminder of the human cost of war. The landscapes were scarred, and the memories of the fallen were ever present. They were the voices of courage, of resilience, of a people fighting for their right to exist. Their bravery was a beacon of hope. Of a people fighting for their right to exist. The Ukrainian flag flew high, a symbol of their unyielding spirit and the support of their fellow countrymen.
The situation in Ukraine remains highly unpredictable. With shifting alliances and ongoing conflict, the future is, well, quite uncertain.
As the struggle continues, the resilience of the Ukrainian people is tested daily. Their determination, however, remains unshaken.
We're witnessing a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape. Nations are re-evaluating their positions and strategies in response to the unfolding events.
This period of flux is redefining international relations and power dynamics across the globe.
Western allies have been pivotal in supporting Ukraine, but questions about the sustainability of this support are emerging.
The commitment of Western nations will be crucial in determining the long-term outcome of this conflict.
Throughout history, periods of intense conflict have often led to new geopolitical realities.
As the world watches, the potential for a new era of global confrontation looms large. The actions of today will shape the international order of tomorrow.